Hello and welcome to Newsmakers for this Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. I'm Louie Butko. Thanks for joining us today. Next Monday, September 30th, marks the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And to discuss that, I'm very pleased to be joined by Anong Migwans Beam, who has published a new book, Carl Beam, Life and Work, recounting the career of her father, who was one of the first artists to shine a light on the abuses endured by more than 150,000 children at residential schools in Canada. Anong is an artist herself as well and is part of the Chigang First Nation on Manitoulin Island, and very pleased to be joined with her today. Anong, I want to talk about your dad, the artist, but I want to start with talking about your dad, the person. Tell me a little bit about Carl Beam.
Okay. Well, my dad was he was a full-time artist my whole life, and he homeschooled me. So that meant I got to be with him everywhere he went on his art shows and digging clay and working on art projects. It was a really unique upbringing and one that influenced me a lot, the direction of my life. I own a paint making company, Beam Paints. So I'm really grateful for that education. He was incredibly interested in art and creative expression of all kinds, all contemporary art from across the world. So he was a really neat guy.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of his, this is a picture from one of his sketchbooks, and I believe that's you being held there in the middle. Mm-hmm. His works, obviously, just as important as him as a father to you, his works for Canadians. Tell us a little bit about the book that you've written and what it showcases.
Yeah, this is interesting because you have to imagine the Canada that he was working in, even just a few decades ago, was so profoundly different than the Canada we're in now. This is before the recognition of residential schools. They really weren't part of the national dialogue. He grew up in a time when you couldn't leave the First Nation, so where you had to have a pass, and if you were found without a pass, you could be arrested. He didn't have the right to vote until 1960. There was a lot of inequity in the social systems. And that also was in art. So when he first started painting, there was a kind of a cartoon idea of what an Indigenous painter, what Native art could look like. And he really challenged that. That's to say that there was also kind of a political layer in this, that if you can take a group of people and deny them a current voice about their current struggles and triumphs, you're really limiting their ability to take part in national dialogues. And his work up until him, any artwork that was brought into museums or art galleries in Canada, it was considered ethnographic. So the people who worked with it were anthropologists, not art curators. So it wasn't considered a current expression of a living culture. It was considered a historical expression of an old culture, maybe something that wasn't gonna make it. So he had a landmark purchase of his big painting, The North American Iceberg, was the very first piece of art to be purchased by the National Gallery of Canada as contemporary art. So he opened that door.
Yeah, 1985, the National Gallery of Canada made it the first piece that was, like you said, purchased by a First Nations artist, acquired. What was the significance of that? Obviously being the first, but you kind of touched on it there. The idea that it was more of a historical artifact as opposed to an expression of feelings, especially as an artist. What did that mean to you?
Oh, it's huge, because I think it means that it opens up the fact that Indigenous people, like all peoples in Canada, are creative, living people in the current times. We have current concerns. We have current wishes and dreams and hopes. And to be held back to be looked at as craft or just as a remnant of a historical time really robs us of a voice in the current times. So he was part, and there was a lot of artists that were working currently with him. And after that purchase, a lot of them came into the national spotlight as well. And we celebrate a lot of those artists nationally as well.
Well put. Your father was one of the first artists as well that highlighted the horrific abuses endured by residential school survivors. How did the trauma or the schools help shape his art?
It's that's kind of tough. Like it was, he had it. There were people who had better experiences and worse experiences. He had a really terrible time there. He endured a lot of physical abuse and psychological abuse. So I think it really shaped the course of his art, that he focused his art on looking at how we as a people can respect each other more, respect different viewpoints, the stories of different cultures. He was trying to say that we're more related than we are different. And a lot of the writing that he did, you see there's written text on almost all of his artwork. A lot of it's talking about that, about how there can be times where political systems will use certain processes to dehumanize groups of people. And we saw that in World War II. We see that now. We saw that then. It's something that we need to be aware of as thinking people in the modern times. And his work was really about exploring that so that we can support each other and move towards a better future as human beings.
Why do Canadians, I mean, Carl Beam is a name that hopefully people will remember for years and years and decades and centuries to come. But why do Canadians need to learn about artists like Carl Beam through your book? Why, it seems like these are artists that should be taught in schools, right? I mean, the importance of people like your dad. How do you feel like your dad's being seen now versus how he used to be seen or how he could be seen in the future?
Well, it's interesting because he was so ahead of his time, and it's been really something for me to see that how his message remained the same from the early 80s right through now. We're in the mid 2020s, and that's a big span, and his message remained the same. And it's really gratifying to see that the contemporary world, the modern Canada, we are so much more ahead of where we used to be. There has been so much positive change. There's so much more positive change ahead, I feel. And I think that acknowledging the work of people who shine a light in corners that need to be examined, it's really great to see that the support of that. And I'm really grateful to Art Canada Institute for commissioning, asking me to write this book.
Now, your dad works labor-intensive jobs in Ontario and BC. How was he? What was his introduction to painting? When did you see him really start to pick it up, or was it something he always did? Like, how did you see his development with art? Being with him basically 24/7.
I think he was really he had one class. I think he got to go back on a Canada Manpower training grant. He got to go back to school for drafting. And I think he had an elective class that was fine art. And he used that, his enthusiasm for that led to full-time art training in being able to go to college and university and study fine art. And then that was it. He was so in love with art expression, and our house is full of books that he found, and we were always going to libraries and art museums, galleries, looking at people's shows, and he was just really loved what he found in art, the expression of people's souls.
And obviously, very naturally gifted. Of course, went to school for it, but just based on his paintings, you can tell that there's a lot of heart, a lot of love in them, and even some of the tragedies that he paints. Going back to him being your dad. Not the artist, but what do you? Obviously, it's been a few decades since he passed away, but what still brings a smile to your face when you think about your dad? What are some of those memories that really stand out to you?
Oh, he was just really funny. He was always he was really magnetic and always the center of a crowd. It didn't matter where we were or what we were doing. He would be in the middle of it, and he played a lot of guitar. He really loved gardening, and he was just a constantly busy. Something was going on, and then you could be sure he had room for somebody. Okay, come and hold this, or let's carry this. We're going over there. And he just loved to travel. He'd drive across the country and have his guitar in the back of the truck and stop at a little picnic area, have a picnic, play some music, and then jump back in the car and keep going. So he was an adventurous person.
Outside of what you do now, of course, being an artist yourself, making paint, what else do you find yourself a lot of, oh, that's my dad? I know there's a lot of times I find myself, oh man, that's something my dad does. Is there something you find yourself just thinking, your dad's always with you because that one little thing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have things like that for sure, because I have two teenagers right now. And I remember things he would say to me, and now I find myself saying the exact same thing to my boys. So, yeah, I enjoy that.
What do what do Canadians need to think about when it comes to Indigenous? I mean, the Truth and Reconciliation is something relatively new, right? What does that mean to you, and what would you like to see Canadians take away from that report and just Truth and Reconciliation in general?
I'd really like to see Canadians read the calls to action. I think it's an incredible document. It's really great. It's really concise, and there's an amazing CBC link somewhere that shows the traction and the action that's actually been taken on the 94 calls to action. And it seems like a lot, but a lot of them are really common sense things. Like, how about everyone gets clean water? I think that the more we look into and share stories from our communities, the more people will see we're not asking for the moon. We just need some equitable action in our communities. We need our schools to be funded the same amount as other schools are funded. There just has to be some rebalancing.
Mm-hmm. Really well put. We talked about telling stories through art, which is what your dad did, but there's tons of different ways. Learning, storytelling, just like you said. We need more spaces for Indigenous art, don't we?
Yeah, or just more shared space and more. I think that's something that was really special about my dad's work, is that he was able to talk about difficult subjects, the residential schools, colonialism, and things like that, ecology, but he did it in a way that was, it's not blaming. It's not like, oh, it's not pointing the finger in a way. It's like it's calling people to be there with him to investigate. And I think that's what's led to the enduring quality of my dad's work, is that he's inviting people to authorize themselves to go ahead, investigate that. Ask more about that, learn more about that. We should all be asking more questions and looking into things more.
Which goes back to what you were talking about with the calls to action. I mean, the 94 things, a lot of them are simple, a lot of them more complex, but it's not an issue of blame, really. It's just kind of accepting that this is part of all of our history, right? This is why we're all here, is because of the people who were here before us.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too to learn about treaties and to realize that everyone in Canada, we're all in treaty relationships, and that these are some beautiful documents that were written and agreed on by all of our forefathers to talk about how we were going to work together and live together in Canada. So in the best possible way, I think they can be signposts towards our current and future relationships.
I know you mentioned your boys, your teenagers. How much of your father do you see in them? I mean, not lucky; they weren't, fortunate enough to get to know him. But when writing this book and seeing your teenagers at home, how much did it come together that those are Grandpa's boys?
Oh yeah, for sure. They definitely are. My oldest was actually born on my dad's birthday.
Oh wow.
Which was really special. Yep. And then my youngest works in his grandpa's studio. Actually, they both do. They both do ceramic work, and it's really fun to see what they do in his studio. And I know he'd be really proud to see their work.
Anong, I was flipping through the book before. It's available online, and just flipping through some of your dad's art. Obviously, really special, really talented. I know you're really talented as well. We'll have to get you back to talk about some of your own art relatively soon. But I really appreciate you making the time with this very important conversation, Anong. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. All right. My thanks to Anong for joining me today. Very important conversation and some great advice there. Just read the calls to action. Do what you can because it is a very important part of our history here as we celebrate the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. My thanks to Anong for joining me. My thanks to you as well for listening. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other shows we have for you. Thanks to Laura Brody for directing today's episode. And on behalf of all of us here at CHCH, have a great day.